Welcome to the College Football Bros. I'm Michael Newman.
I'm Ryan Newman.
And I'm Trey Newman.
All right, we are on to day 2 of head coach rankings week. Yesterday we covered the ACC, so be sure to check that out both in your podcast app and on YouTube if you haven't already. If you do watch on YouTube, be sure to give us a thumbs up and a comment. Share it with a friend who likes college football. We're trying to grow the show this week, putting out a lot of content, so we'd appreciate your help. But let's get right into it. Let's start, Trey, with the worst coach in the Big 12.
Yeah, and probably the worst team in the Power 5. Kansas's Emmett Jones. And, even if this was Les Miles, I'd probably still have him at 10th here anyways.
Oh, yeah.
Kansas they're not good. It's a tough hole for them to climb out of now. If Jones really ends up being the guy this year, the actual head coach, he's very unproven. He's never been a head coach and only been around college football for the last 5 years since he was in Texas high school level, the prior about 10. So it was just hard. You can't put him any higher than this.
Yeah, and if they do end up hiring, there's some rumors lately that they are going to try and go get a Lance Leopold or Jeff Monken. If they're able to pull that off, then obviously they'll climb up the list.
Don't see that happening. But maybe I'm wrong. Who knows? All right, let's move on here. Number 9, we have Matt Wells from Texas Tech. Just hard to see any real upside here. It just seems like a tough spot for Matt Wells, not bringing in really much talent, not putting the greatest product on the field, only a few wins the past couple of years. Wasn't super impressed with what he did really at Utah State. He had a couple of good years there after taking over a good program. Then he kind of got the middle years were kind of a little lean and finished pretty well, but just wasn't overly impressed. And it just doesn't seem like, what can you point to that, oh yeah, this is where I feel confident in Matt Wells, that it's going to work out in Lubbock. It's a tough spot. He's not really moving the needle for me. So 9th seems pretty fair.
Yeah, hard to have him much higher than that. Number 8 on our list is Dave Aranda at Baylor. He had a tough act to follow, of course, with Matt Rule going 11-3 in 2019. And they did have very little returning production. Pretty much it seemed like, maybe except for Charlie Brewer, it seemed like everyone was gone going into 2020. So they were expected to be bad. Maybe not quite as bad as they were. They went 2-7, so not a great start. But like we've said in our previous coaching episodes, 2020 was not a great offseason to be a first-year head coach. So I'll give them a little bit of a break. And they did, they weren't as bad as I thought they were, actually. They're, when I look back at their schedule, had some close losses. So we'll see what happens. But for now, 8th is certainly his ceiling right now.
Yeah, and I one thing that I noticed was he did an amazing job, obviously, as a defensive assistant, especially at Wisconsin and at LSU. But I found it interesting that in total defense in the 4 years at LSU, every year it actually regressed. Obviously, it culminated where they won the national championship the last year, but it wasn't really thanks to much of the defense. So it'll be interesting to see how he can do it at a tougher program with a little bit less talent than LSU at Baylor. So I'll be curious to watch him in the coming years. Okay. Moving on to our 7th coach, Chris Kleiman of Kansas State, and we all agreed we had him pegged in this spot. I was really, really impressed with him after the 2019, his first year at K-State. Took a little bit of a step back though last year, 4-6. And that was even with a win at Oklahoma, which surprised us all. They're expected to be right around average on offense and defense next year, so I'm not expecting a whole lot. His recruiting classes have been in the 50s since he's gotten there, and I don't think he's a bad coach whatsoever. I just don't see him quite above the guys that we have ahead at this point. I'm open-minded on him and willing to see what he does, but at this point, this is where we put him.
Yeah, he was kind of belongs. Oh, go ahead, Ryan.
Sure. He was kind of gifted more of a that first year, a very senior laden team. He had a ton of experience. So, it was a good year. He did a good job. But you kind of expected at least a decent year. And then the following year, this past year, you kind of thought it was going to be the opposite. You weren't expecting a whole lot from them, and they were all right. So the jury is definitely still out on him. They never recruit obviously at a super high level. You just hope he can get into that JUCO ranks. Like obviously Bill Snyder did such a great job of. They have some good talent there in the Kansas area.
Yeah, yeah. I still think he's a solid coach, but yeah, hard to put him much higher than this when you see who our next coach is, Ryan.
Yep. Number 6 from TCU, we got Gary Patterson. They kind of solid year last year, going 6-4. I mean, nothing to write home about, but it was an improvement over the previous year. The only thing with him, obviously, he just hasn't been able to, kind of replicate the success that he had earlier in his tenure. He's been there for a long time and experienced some really, big highs there at TCU. He is TCU, really. So I do think this year is kind of an important year. He's got enough returning production, some QB coming back. There's reasons for optimism to maybe improve off of what they even did last year, going 6-4. So if they can get up to 8-ish wins, maybe, flirt with trying to compete for the Big 12, championship game, get in there. Then all of a sudden Patterson's back on top again. He's been doubted before and he's proven himself again. Can he do it one more time? I'm not sure, but it's been a little while since he's had one of those magical years.
Yeah, I mean, I've been higher on him than most for a long period of time, and that's mainly just because I'm stubborn and I can't erase what he did or what he's done at TCU. I mean, the recent form sure has been left a little bit to be desired, but like from 2005 to 11, I know that's 10 years ago, but they won 11 or more games in 6 of the 7 years. They won 6 bowl games, and that included a Rose Bowl. And even, I know it's kind of been all or nothing the last 7 or so years, but 3 of the 7, they finished in the top 10. So it's not like they're totally inept.
Yeah.
I'm going to give him one last chance kind of this year, and then I'm willing to slide him down if they do underperform.
Yeah, he was one of the tougher coaches to rank in the Big 12 because, it hasn't been that long, like you said, even more recently than the 10 years. Yeah, you just mentioned he's had some top 10 finishes in the last 7 years. So I guess Ryan and I are more bearish on that he's going to have one of those 10-win seasons again. I will say Kirk Ferentz kind of had a similar stretch to what has happened to Patterson these past 3 years. So the past 3 years, Patterson's been kind of mediocre. Ferentz had a similar stretch in the early 2010s, and since then has rebounded and risen back up the list in the Big Ten. So we'll see if Gary Patterson can do the same. I'm kind of 50-50 on whether it's just sort of his time has passed or if he'll, have a revival.
Right.
But moving on to number 5, we have Neil Brown at West Virginia, and a big part of his ranking comes from what he did at Troy. He won double-digit games 3 years in a row there, which is just insane. So an A-plus job there. And then at West Virginia, took over a tough situation, a roster that had lost a lot, so they weren't expected to be good at all in year one. So actually going 5-7 was basically meeting expectations in year one, even though it might look bad on paper. And this last year, 6-4, solid season. So he's recruiting decently well. I think he's a solid coach and has things going in the right direction there. I'm getting no disagreements, it looks like.
I know, Ryan.
Ryan, we're with you.
Well, I'm with him, but Ryan, I know you've been a Neil Brown guy, so I was kind of expecting you to, if you had any comments on Neil.
No, I just agree with Michael. There's no like home run things he's done so far in Morgantown, but he's steadily improved them. He's kind of like, weathered the storm right at the beginning of his tenure. You thought it could get really ugly at the beginning with all that mass exodus of players that they had, but did a good job, brought in a decent amount of players to kind of fill in the void. And, they could have a pretty good year this year. There kind of might be one of my dark horse teams coming into the Big 12 this year.
Yep. So now we kind of get to where I think the pack kind of separated, in my opinion, and we get to number 4, and that's Steve Sarkisian of Texas. I usually don't rank a new coach this high, maybe on a list, especially coming into a new conference, but I love how he really transformed Alabama's offense, and I also weigh in the fact that he's walking into a very good situation. Herman didn't leave the cupboard bare. So I think he can succeed early. Obviously, I say I think just because it is a little bit of an unknown. And the overall, though, as a head coach, he gets a little bit of a bad rap, in my opinion, for his Washington and USC days because, I mean, they were always generally respectable. And then kind of obviously we know now in hindsight, he was battling some demons. So I think he's at the right point in his career that he could be legit.
Yeah, I do like him. Trey, you had him third. Ryan and I were just a little bit lower. I like the experience that he has as a head coach because, like you said, he did a pretty good job at Washington. I mean, hit a little bit of a ceiling there, but did a pretty good job. And USC was just kind of his grade as an incomplete. It just didn't really get off the ground, and of course had the personal issues there. But I love that he's a great recruiter. I'm sure he's going to kill it in recruiting at Texas. But I guess I felt even better about Tom Herman when he took over the job, and he did fine, but of course didn't quite live up to the billing. So I guess I'm just being a little bit more cautious with Sark compared to a guy like Neil Brown, who has had some recent high-level success in the high G5 and even promising start at West Virginia.
Yeah, it's hard to rank a first-year coach because, I mean, the success for Steve Sarkisian could obviously be the ultimate on this list. I mean, he could win multiple Big 12 titles. He could be in playoffs. Texas has the highest ceiling of all, so he could rise up to number one, no doubt. And I like him. I really do. I think that's why I put him ahead of a guy like Gary Patterson and Chris Kleiman, people that have done some good things as head coaches where they're at. But Sark has proven what he did at Alabama. I know they have amazing talent, and they were even good on offense before he got there. But what he did was pretty crazy to see how great he got them. So if he can just replicate like a little bit of that at Texas, they're going to be winning Big 12s.
And we talk about sometimes ranking coaches. You sort of have to rank the staffs too, because if they've hired a really good staff, it's going to help make them look good. And I think Sark has done that. He's bringing in Pete Kwiatkowski from Washington as the D coordinator. Yeah. I think that was a great hire. So brought in some of his staff from Alabama too. So yeah, I could definitely see him being, in 1 or 2 years, he could be number 2 on this list very easily, or 1, who knows?
Yeah. Yep. All right. Let's move on here. Let's get to the top 3. At number 3, we have Mike Gundy from Oklahoma State. It's hard to deny this, man. 15 straight winning seasons in Stillwater. That's
amazing.
That's quite a streak, man, for Stillwater, for Oklahoma State. That's wow. One of the most underrated coaches nationally just doesn't get enough credit for what he's done there. 6 years he's had of 10 or more wins. The only knock is he just hasn't been able to get that recruiting up to a level where he can truly compete with Oklahoma every year, which, I mean, that's not necessarily realistic, but, you would like to have seen it after being there for so long, having some really darn good years to maybe pop into the top 25 at least, or top 20 of the recruiting, but he just never has been able to do it. They're always in the 30s or so. But, I mean, you can't be unhappy with what he's been doing. You wish he would be number 1 if he could have just up the recruiting a little bit, but awesome coach overall.
He is an awesome coach. He's a wizard. Just when you kind of think they're going to take a step back, they overachieve. And I will say he 1000% deserves this ranking. But personally, I just want to see the Pokes get over the hump one of these years. They're always so close, but they'll lose to Texas, or they'll lose some game that they maybe shouldn't have, and they just can't quite get over the hump. And
one really good year.
Yeah.
Brandon Wheaton.
Yeah, they lost to Iowa State. Yeah. I wonder if they're just going to constantly be now in this 8-4-ish record. I mean, given the Okie State history, that's not bad, but I think Gundy spoiled the Cowboy fans recently to maybe want a little more.
Yeah, the fans are definitely left wanting more. Like this past season, they were a dark horse playoff contender. At least that's what the perception was before the year. But you look at it, I mean, 8-3, that's a good season at Oklahoma State, but yet it didn't quite feel like it to the fans because there was, that promise before the year. So,
yep.
Okay. Moving on to number 2 on the list, and it is Matt Campbell of Iowa State. He has done as good a job as you can possibly ask at Iowa State. He has them, had them as a legit top 10 type team last year. They've got basically everyone coming back, so they're going to be preseason certainly top 10 and, top 7 or 8 probably. So that is amazing. I guess the only question is do you have him or Lincoln Riley number one? Trey and I sided with Lincoln Riley. It was kind of splitting hairs, but I guess the one knock on Matt Campbell, not even a knock, it's just more of an unknown, is he an elite recruiter? I mean, he hasn't been that at Iowa State, but hard to expect someone to do that there. So at least with Lincoln Riley, I've seen him at the highest level, recruit with the big boys. So, but Ryan, why do you have Campbell number one?
Yeah, I you talk about recruiting as the one knock. Nobody's gonna recruit Iowa State high level. It doesn't matter really who you are.
I mean, I'm not expecting top 10 classes and but it would be nice if it were a little better.
If he was at Oklahoma, he would be recruiting top 10 classes. No doubt about it, in my eyes.
Bob Stoops wasn't even doing that at the end, so I don't know. I mean, maybe you're right, but maybe not.
Top 15.
Well, yeah, okay, top 15, yeah.
Or at least I think he would be having the same type of success that Lincoln Riley would. I just give him so much credit for what he's done there. 4 straight bowl games, 4 straight winning seasons in the Big 12. This is the best run Iowa State has ever had. Like, it's clear as day. This is the best run they've had. And, of course, they're going to continue it this year. They should have another really good year. Oklahoma's had great runs before, better than this. Lincoln Riley, they've been really good. They haven't really truly been a threat to win the national title. They've made playoffs, but they were never truly like, okay, we're there. I mean, maybe the one year where they barely lost to Georgia, but that might have been a year. But it just feels like they are still a little bit behind. So I give Matt Campbell more credit for giving Iowa State almost to their level. I mean, they're right there neck and neck every time they play pretty much. So if you look to head, that's a big factor too. Iowa State's got him a couple times. So, I mean, I have no problem putting Lincoln Riley number one, but I just want to give Iowa State and Matt Campbell some love and, put him number one.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't have a problem with having Matt Campbell number one. I feel like having to take the anti-Matt Campbell route here is like, that's not me. I love Matt Campbell. So, yeah.
Yeah, so we, of course, obviously have Lincoln Riley overall as number one, but I respect Ryan for putting Campbell at number one. Ultimately, and I thought about it, but ultimately I didn't have the courage. And the reason, I understand that Lincoln Riley inherited about as good of a situation as anyone could ask for. But the thing is he really hasn't slowed down. They consistently are in the playoff mix, even if they're not maybe a title threat, but he's developing Heisman quarterbacks over and over. Now he's got young Spencer Rattler poised to do the same this year. He's understood that their defense has hindered them, and he's addressed that, and it has improved a little bit each year.
Yep.
I don't necessarily agree with maybe his overall opinions or his views and transferring within conference, but as a coach, he's the man.
Yeah.
And since he started calling plays at OU, the year before he got there, actually, as an offensive coordinator, I think they went 8-5. Now maybe they were probably destined to do better than that anyway, but since he got there as an offensive coordinator, the team has finished in the AP poll 5th, 3rd, 4th, 7th, and 6th. And of course, 4 of those were as when he's a head coach. So it's just, and the recruiting has taken a jump up since the end of the Bob Stoops era. I give him credit for that. So
yeah,
I think
to Ryan's point,
one.
it's like if you stick Lincoln Riley in Ames, it's impossible to predict. I mean, we're splitting hair. It is hard.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah. All right. Well, let's put up the list for the YouTube viewers of the top 10 here, the all 10 coaches in the Big 12. What kind of themes jump out to you, Trey?
I mean, honestly, I'm really, really interested to see what our listeners and viewers think of the rankings, because I feel like there is very little to argue on our rankings at this point. Sure, maybe a spot or two for some guys, but overall, I think as a whole, it seemed pretty straightforward.
I agree. This was the easiest conference to rank. I think there's only 2 guys that are I could see people moving a couple slots. Gary Patterson, because of everything he's accomplished and not being that far removed from being very good. So I could see wanting him to be a few slots higher. And then Steve Sarkisian, that's, I could see wanting him a few slots lower. But other than that, I don't see how you disagree much. Yeah.
Yeah, this was a straightforward one here. Really not much debate. I mean, the thing with this is like, I think more so than any other conference, we just kind of have seen some of these guys other than Sark. We've seen a lot of these guys at their places, so we kind of have a good feel for them already. So that's why I think to me it was a little easier to rank.
Yeah. All right. Well, that'll do it for the Big 12 head coach rankings. Again, like we've been saying, let us know in the comments below your biggest disagreements. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe here, but also subscribe to our podcast. This week, all the episodes are the same, whether you're watching it or listening to it, but generally we have different content on each platform, so appreciate subscriptions to both. Other than that, we will be back tomorrow to rank the head coaches in the Big Ten. So, Scott Frost, number 1. See you then.
You've been watching the College Football Bros. Be sure to subscribe here on YouTube and in your podcast app for college football content all year round. For bonus episodes and access to our Discord chat, join our Patreon at patreon.com/collegefootballbros. Thanks for watching.